cousin isn't here, is she? Hi, can I just give me a second?
I was so worried because you ran off, I couldn't find you. No, don't sing, please.
Okay, I feel much better. What a relief.
As we go up there, ask questions.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Are we good to start? We're live streaming this, so I'm trying to. Are we good to start? Are we? Oh, we are good to start. Great. Hi, welcome, and also hello to the online, the 5 people online. The walls have ears. Hi, my name is Adam Greenfield. I'm the associate artistic director here at Playwrights Horizons. Thank you all so much for coming to the symposium today. Great turnout, especially on a beautiful fall Saturday afternoon. And thank you to this great team of panelists. We started this symposium series a few years ago as a way of opening up the conversation around our plays to sort of the life of ideas that surround the plays. And we felt like the best way to do that was to basically ask the writer, well, who would you most want to talk to about your play, about this play you wrote, as opposed to us deciding that for him. So this is, we've been doing this for a few years now, and really delighted that we have these panelists joining us today, and I'll introduce them to you now. To my left is Susan Cheever. Susan has published many books, most recently Drinking in America, Our Secret History, as well as 5 memoirs, 5 novels, 5 biographies, and many essays which have appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, and Newsday. She's taught at Yale, Sarah Lawrence, Brown, the New School in Bennington, and we are very thrilled she can join us today. To Susan's left is Dara Santiago. Ren is a Harlem-based playwright and actor. She's been nominated for the Dorrit Wilson Independent Playwright Award in both 2015 and 2016 for her family drama, The Siblings play, which has been workshopped at the Labyrinth at MCC, and also with the Middle Voice at the Rattlesnake Playhouse Theater. To Ren's left is Adam Bock. Adam's a playwright, best known for Small Fire.
A life.
I was leading up to it.
Oh, you're sorry.
God. Small Fire, The Receptionist, The Drunken City, The Thugs, and Swimming in the Shallows. His work has been seen just about anywhere theater is served. And in New York at Playwrights Horizons, Manhattan Theater Club, Soho Rep, Club Thumb, Rattlestick, and Second Stage. And his play, A Life, is, of course, the reason that we're all here today. And speaking of lives, this is like an especially momentous chat that we're having this afternoon because today also happens to be the birthday of playwright Adam Bock.
Birthday. Good job. Should be for my mom. Really.
Nobody has any idea what his age is.
55.
But we're really happy to wish him. And I hope that you'll actually all join me in singing happy birthday to Adam while Carl Baker Olson delivers some birthday treats to him. So, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Adam. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. None of you watched my play, clearly. Not a person.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
We wanted to give everybody some dessert treats, but we don't have enough money. Like one too?
Yeah.
So nice.
Why don't we, Mars, you want this?
Yeah,
No?
Do you want to? Did your cousin want one?
Yes. Oh, this is the card. This is the best part.
And before we start, thanks, Carl. Can I just get a show of hands of who has seen the play already? And great. And who hasn't seen the play yet? Okay, we're gonna all do our very, very best to not blow anything for you.
But we are gonna.
But if we do it, we're really sorry. There's not really. It's a hard thing to talk about without giving some stuff away. So, apologies.
But it's done even better than we say it. It will be.
You can't even possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Can't.
No.
True, actually. So we'll talk a little bit for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up after that to questions from you guys. And then this will probably be over around 5:21 approximately. I guess I'll turn it over to you, Adam. If you can talk a little bit about sort of like, you know, when we sat down to sort of talk about what this panel was going to be.
Right.
You had a very clear attack that you wanted to do.
I did. When they asked me to do the seminar, the symposium, I came in with an idea that I wanted, and they made a bunch of suggestions, and I kiboshed them all. I was like, no, because I really wanted to talk about this one thing. Susan and I have been great friends for a long time. We met up at Yaddo, and I'm a playwright, and she's would you say a creative nonfiction?
We just had a conversation about that.
Yeah. So see, this is going to be what's going to be useful.
Yeah, creative is a bankrupt adjective, so don't.
Okay, so
use it.
a non-creative nonfiction writer.
Book writer.
You're a book writer. And what I wanted to talk about is memoir. I wanted to find out where this play is a departure for me because, or not a complete, it's hard to say. A lot of me is in this play. A lot of me. And usually what I'll do when I write a play is I will cover it. I'll change names. I'll make men women. I'll do this one I didn't. So the Lucy that you heard about in the play is my friend Lucy Thurber, and she said the things that Lucy said to Nate. On and on and on. So what I wanted to talk about was how memoir, or the idea of memoir, works in art. How much should we use, or how much do we use, or how do we use it? And Susan knows a lot about memoir, so I thought I'd ask you first to sort of tell us, like, what is memoir, and what's the difference, say, between memoir and autobiography, or something? Just, can you give us some sort of, a little bit of, is that hard or possible?
Well, it's hard, but I can try.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So memoir is a kind of nonfiction, and to me, memoir just means that the work is based on memoir. And so I believe that memoir is the novel of the 21st century. I believe it's a form that we're just beginning to explore, to wit this wonderful play, right? And that so far, many memoirs have been essentially autobiographies, to answer your second question, but that in fact, you can write a memoir of 5 minutes, you can write a memoir about your driver's license. In other words, all kinds of things could be done with memoir that are really just beginning to be done. We're just really beginning to discover the deliciousness of this form in which we write from remembered facts rather than imagined facts, the way we write in fiction. But to my mind, that's the only difference. In other words, when you're writing fiction, you imagine the facts, and sometimes you remember them. And when you're writing memoir, you always remember the facts, unless you say to the reader, and I imagine that, blah, 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 which of course you can always go in through that back door. So I think it's a fascinating form. I think we're just beginning to discover what it can be, and I think this play is such a great example of what we're beginning to discover, that you can do all kinds of things with it that nobody's really done before. I mean, I tell my students, this is why nonfiction is so exciting. Memoir until about 1985 was basically Walden by Henry David Thoreau, My Dog Tulip by J.R. Ackerley. There were 5 of them. And now, in 1982, 83, and 84, I wrote a memoir about my father, who was a famous writer, and no one else had done that. And as I was doing it, I couldn't figure out if it was something you could do because I had no models. I had Ackerley, who wrote a book about his father in the 19th century, which was, and I had Brooke Hayward had written a book about her family. But there was nothing, there was no one. In 1982, there were no memoirs by children about their parents. Can you believe that? 1982. And I just kept going forward, but I had no idea what I was doing. And now it's a whole genre, children writing about their famous parents. And so that's what I mean. We're just beginning with this. And it's expanding really fast, and to my mind, it's the most interesting of the genres right now. But that's what it is, a genre. And I also think it is nonfiction. Although, of course, you can always say to the reader or the audience, now I'm going to make something up and make it up. But I answered your question. Oh, I have one more thing to say about it that's really important.
Good.
So, one of the exciting things about memoir is its political dimension. And at first, in the 80s and 90s, and even now, the preponderance of memoirs are written by women. And I feel as if memoir has given a voice to people who have been traditionally voiceless. So women, people of color, when Rosemary Mahoney, who had worked as a gopher for Lillian Hellman, hated the job, she wrote a memoir about it, in which she skewered Lillian Hellman. In other words, the things that we used to talk about among our friends or in ladies' rooms or in the kitchen, now we women, we people who didn't have a voice before, now we can write books in which we use our lives in this new and amazing way. And I think that because it is so politically powerful for people to have a voice, there's been a lot of pushback from authority. Authority does not like to be challenged. And so I think that there's a whole thing that's going on, which is essentially conspiracy theory coming up, authority biting back, because what man wants his researcher to write a memoir about how he comes onto her? Nobody, right? What employer wants their employees to get to write a book about how awful they are? They don't. So the whole idea of memoir has been tainted. There's this idea that it's confessional and somehow feminine and somehow icky and somehow, and when people say, and somehow self-indulgent. And I think that's authority's way of biting back. And what amazes me is how successful this smear campaign has been. I have so many students who are writing memoir and won't call it memoir. I call this memoir shame. Right? Because they're written, and it's not just Joan Didion has just written a couple of brilliant memoirs, and she says, oh no, I'm not writing memoir, I'm writing personal essay. Oh, right? So people who are writing memoir often don't even want to admit they're writing memoir because they don't want to be accused of being self-indulgent, confessional, feminine, all these things that authority now has branded on memoir. And I think that's the pushback from the political power that memoir has given to people who didn't have that kind of power before. So it couldn't be more interesting. And I am a proud memoir writer.
Yeah.
And not a personal essayist, right? And not any of those other, synonyms that people use when they're writing memoir and don't want to admit they're writing memoir. But I think it's the most interesting thing that's happening in writing right now. And certainly not that we care about commercial things, but this is also clearly what a lot of people want to read about.
Great. Ren, when you're listening to Susan, what popped into your head?
Black Lives Matter. That's the first thing that pops into my mind. My news feed is full of, well, they would say just personal stories or accounts of like, this is what my day was like. Or I had read something that was just published on somewhere. I think Huffington Post just posted it. Someone I know, this actress I know, Liz Morgan, wrote why I was late to work today and probably will be for the rest of my life. Somebody's nodding. I think you read it. Which is just, I think exactly what you're saying. It gives you empowerment and healing to share your story and have it resonate with people and for people to believe you and not call you a liar. So that was like really inspiring for me.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was making the same connection of like, I wonder whether it, because everybody is a memoirist these days on social media.
Yeah.
In a way. So like we're all learning to write from each other all the time on social media.
Or not.
Or not. Yeah.
How to not listen.
Right.
Yeah. How to exaggerate and not to, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But
That was a
I'm interested in when you're starting to talk about gender politics, like when First of all, I'm gonna do, I'm terrible at this. Just basically, I'm just gonna say it, because I am. I'm like, fuck, now I gotta ask a good question that has something to do with this, but it's not my skill. So we'll just accept that. What we're gonna do is accept that, and I can move on from there.
It's very old school of you.
It is, we were talking about that recently,
we were
right?
talking about that. In the old days, when you got in front of an audience, the first thing you did, this audience looks like the right audience for this. The first thing you did was tell them you didn't know what you were doing, right? And it's called for, I've been working on this my whole life, and for the last week I've done nothing but I don't want to brag about it, so I'm going to say I don't know what I'm doing. Now, when people Ren's age get up and talk about their own work, they get up and they say, "You're in for a treat tonight." And they say, "I've done a lot of really good work. This is really the best." And then their friends who introduce them are like, "Oh my goodness, when I read whoever's work,
I was thrilled.
I was thrilled." But it's just fashion, really, right?
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
I don't know, like on TV, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
You were just doing it.
Yeah, well, I did it then, but it's the truth, actually. Tragically, I'm not humble bragging. I'm like really, Ren has written. I got to know Ren because my friend Lucy Thurber has sort of gathered around her a group of great young writers, and who I admire. And they've sort of fashioned themselves into a group called Middle Voice, where they put each other's. It almost feels a little bit like Greenwich Village and whatever, like. Yeah, it's like Cappuccino or all these different places where people gather and care about each other a lot, and they're deep friendships, and it's an exciting thing when it happens in the theater, because our whole art form is built on people coming together to make things. Right, Rachel?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Rachel is the head of National Theatre Institute up at the O'Neill. And how many of you guys are here from NTI? Which is thrilling, and I can't believe there's so many of you. I'm thrilled that you're here. There's 60 now, right, at the school?
46, right?
It's
Yes.
46 here, but you have more at school, right?
We will have more, yes.
Yeah, it's astonishing. So what Rachel tries to teach these acting, playwriting, directing students that are from NTI is that your group that you work with is going to be really important to you. They're going to be the people that you work with throughout your life. I went to NTI in 1985, and 12 of them came to see the play one night. And I'd seen most of them, but I'd known of them, and I Facebooked, but it was so great because they're all still working on things, or they're in community theater. It's just wonderful. So, but I wanted to talk to you about, as a writer, writing with your friends. Do you put yourself in your place? Do they laugh at you?
Yeah.
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 Like, for example, in Battle, your play Battle, are you Asa?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, like, kind of me on multiple different dates,
Yeah.
and then the memories in that play are totally fictionalized ways of me trying to figure out something about why intimacy is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all of the present moments are basically me.
Things you borrowed, right?
Yeah.
This is what I do often. I'll be having an experience, and I'll be like, oh, I'm also writing it down back here. Like at first I'm yelling at someone, but I'm like, I gotta remember.
Oh,
And then when they're like, wait a minute. They're like, the fight starts again. I put it down. And they're like, do your friends ever say, oh, am I in your play?
Yeah, the first play I ever produced. Yeah.
The first play what?
That ever got a production.
What was it called?
Come to Star Street.
Uh-huh.
Which was about 5 young people living together, and my very best friend at the time was like, you wrote me as the villain. We didn't talk for like a year because she didn't understand that I was actually the villain, that person was me. I just put myself in her circumstance because somehow it changed things for me and it made more sense.
Yeah. I remember when my mom came to see a play of mine at Brown. She's like, is that what you think families are like? And then she wouldn't come to see another play for about 5 years.
Yeah.
She was like, And I was like, yeah, kind of. My character burned the house down at the end of it, so it's like, Susan, do you ever get in trouble for putting anything in your books?
Yeah. Where you tuck in lawsuits? What level are
What
we?
level? So what levels are there for Ren to know that are coming?
There are lawsuits.
They're lawsuits.
And then there are angry letters and affidavits. And then one of my subjects once sent me a God box, and she suggested that I put my nasty thoughts in the God box instead of putting God box, right? God box inside. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of the big problems of nonfiction is how to deal with or not deal with the feelings of the people you may or may not have written about.
Yes.
And it's one of the questions that a lot of my students have. I'm just chicken, you know. I send people the manuscript and I say, hi, you've ended up in this book of mine, surprise, surprise. And, read it if there's anything you don't want in it, and then I write a very tricky sentence, you know. I'll certainly consider changing it possibly. I mean, I write a sentence that sounds like I'm gonna change it, but doesn't promise that I'm gonna change it.
Because
And
if they
it's
take a good
interesting.
one, you know.
Well, they may, right, well, famously now, I wrote a book about my mother.
Uh-huh.
Well, everyone in this story is dead now. So my mother, when she had been married to my father for about 25 years, really fell in love with someone else. And unfortunately for her, I became her confidant. I was in my 30s, I knew about these things, she had never really been in love before. And so 20 years later, when I went to write a book about her, of course I put that, I mean, come on guys, right? And he was dead, his wife was dead, and she said to me, you can't put this in your book. She said, this didn't happen. I'm like, Mom, don't you remember the letter he wrote, blah, blah, blah. And she said, you can't put it in your book. And so, reader, I took it out.
You did?
I took it out.
Are you sorry you did?
Well, I think I wouldn't have done that now,
Mm-hmm.
but I was younger.
She was still alive.
I knew I had to live with her for another 30 years. She died 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I just didn't, I think now I would be able, partly from teaching, I would be able to say to her, I totally respect what you're saying, but this is my book about this story, and it's really not about you, you're just, but my mother had been used as a character by my father in fiction over and over and over again, and I just think she got to a point where she had it. And here comes her daughter, the second generation.
Whole other angle.
Right, ratting her out in a
Plus
whole new
she'd
way.
given birth to you.
Yeah,
You
and
seemed
she
rude.
was like, and I think I could have talked her out of it, but I didn't even really, now I would try to talk her out of it.
Yeah.
But at the time, I took it out.
Yeah. I'm thinking of when I was at grad school at Brown. They were just starting to do deconstruction. It was time of postmodernism and deconstruction, and people were just starting, like the feminist film theory people were starting to talk about the difference between an objective truth and a subjective truth.
And what is that?
Well, one is when you pretend that there is a truth that's outside of you, which is objective. I'm being objective about this. We've all been in an argument when someone pulls back and says, well, I'm being objective and you're not, you know?
So it's not raining out, that's an objective truth.
Well, it's more that they're pretending they're using objective truth to argue.
Give me an example.
They would say something like, you always act like that.
Oh, that's.
Right? They tell you who you are.
What's objective about that?
Well, they're pretending that they're being objective.
I
They're
see.
pretending that there's an
I see.
objective truth that they have owned.
I see.
And then suddenly, so it's that sort of authoritative voice that says, I know what the truth is, and this is what the truth is, and that's why we do this way, and this is what the truth is. And then suddenly the feminist film theory class that I was in was starting to say, no, that doesn't exist, that's not true. Actually, all truth is subjective. meaning there's a truth I have, there's a truth you have, there's a truth someone, you know, it's a very different way of doing it. And it came out of feminism. It came out of the desire probably to break down that authoritative voice and to say that all of us have our own truths, you know. And I think actually memoir is on,
Right.
it's on the side of that. It
Right,
feels
well,
like.
that thing is happening to
Yeah.
me too, where people are saying memoir is a feminine, self-indulgent, confessional genre, and other people are just writing it.
Right.
What is it? What is that? What do you mean? Like, what is the case they're making for it being a feminine genre? What's
Mostly
that?
written
What's-
by women.
That's a
Oh, literally, and that's an insult.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that's an insult, right, but that also, you know, they're not making a case, they're smearing it.
right.
Well, it's interesting, like, we're so trained in thinking that the feminine is bad,
Right.
that
And
automatically
the
like,
self-
oh, it's
and the
feminine, or
confessional
it's,
is
yeah.
bad,
And confessional
right?
is bad, yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, in the old days, when people, well, I'm just thinking about fiction in the old days. So my father was a fiction writer and he often used our lives.
Mhm.
And when you said to him, Dad, we went on this ski trip, you know, and why did you put this ski trip in the New Yorker magazine? And he would say, that's fiction. When Saul Bellow wrote a book called Humboldt's Gift about his time at Princeton, and many of the characters at Princeton show up in this book, and I said to my father, look at this, here's Richard Everhart. And he was like, you're reducing fiction to gossip. And I'm like, but it's exactly like him. And he was like, no. So that whole generation of fiction writers resisted this idea that fiction had anything to do with life, that it was any way based on life, even when it manifestly was. And we've come way over to the other side now, right? But he was horrified by the idea that anybody would read fiction and think, gee, that actually looks just like me and did something that I did and said something I said. So, yeah, but that idea has been completely broken down. Now when we read fiction, all we want to know is who is it really based on.
Mm. Mm. So do you think your dad was like feeling like you lost the idea that it was a made object?
Well, I think he you know, because he
Using
wasn't
truth.
that generation, he used a lot of language like transcendent vision. So he felt he had a transcendent vision, which was taking these nuts and bolts of daily life and transforming it into art.
Mm-hmm.
And to drag it back down into daily life was to diminish it.
Mm.
And I don't think he was wrong.
Mm.
As you remember, in those days, ladies and gentlemen, when dinosaurs walked the earth, there were two schools of literary criticism. One school felt that the more you knew, the better. That was F.R. Leavis. And the other school, I.A. Richards, the new criticism, felt that art should be apprehended in a complete vacuum. That when you looked at a painting or read a book, you should know nothing about the writer or the painter and the circumstances of creation. That knowing about it somehow would pollute your experience. And you know, they were both interesting arguments, but the Richards argument has totally lost. In other words, when you go to the Whitney to see the Marshall show, there's more writing on the wall than there is painting on the wall. In other words, the idea that you should look at those incredible pictures of his without knowing anything about him, nobody even thinks that anymore, right?
What do you attribute that to? Because it's also like, I mean, if you know, we were talking about how in 1985, before pre-1985, there were only 5 memoirs, and now there's so much memoir writing. What do you think? Do you have any ideas about like what's the cultural shift? Like, how did our personalities change that make us more open to people's individuals, like blatantly individual stories?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that for a minute, and then I'm going to shut up because I feel like I'm, you know, culturally, everything has gone forward on that same track, and you know, we live in a culture of personality, but the good news is we live in a culture that automatically challenges all authority, and that's the good news about this. So when a writer says to you, when Ernest Hemingway says to you, I don't care if you're my son, this is not based on you, you no longer have to back away, right? So the whole idea of authority as it was, very protected, very male, very heterosexual, that idea has really been broken down, and I think that's the good news. You know, the bad news is we now feel we can't read a novel without knowing everything about the novelist, and really often you shouldn't. Often the novel will be better if you just allow yourself to read the novel
And float.
without knowing, you know, I mean, really, I do think art should be apprehended in a semi-vacuum. I don't think it helps you to see those paintings at the Whitney, it's not even called the Whitney anymore, the Met Royer. I don't think it's helpful to know everything about him. They're amazing paintings, go and see them, but don't read the stuff on the wall. You'll have a better experience.
Or do both, like read it afterwards.
Yeah, or read it afterwards, but
Yeah.
don't pay too much attention to it, because really it's about the power of the, you know, as Emily Dickinson said, it's supposed to blow the top of your head off. And it's not gonna blow the top of your head off if you know what he had for breakfast. You know, you're really hurting yourself. Okay, now, zip.
That's interesting though. How do you like people, have you had the experience yet of people knowing what your show's about before you go and worrying about whether they're gonna, like in this show, for example, I try not to tell everybody what it's about because I want the surprise to exist.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
so it's hard, but at the same time, I've had friends who've come and they're like, oh my God, that was you, and that was you, and that was you. And they've had a very different experience than someone who doesn't know me. You know, so there's a bunch of experiences that are happening because I have friends who've known me from different parts of my life, and this play is from lots of different parts of my life. And so someone who knew me at Brown when I was up in Providence will be like, I knew that bead store. As they're watching the play, they're like, that bead store. Yeah.
It's because all I could pick up on were like, I don't know, certain ways of speaking and mannerisms that
Sound like
David, yeah.
Yeah.
And Lucy, but he'd say Lucy,
Yeah.
and I say Lucy.
Yeah, right. So it's a little different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
No, the bead store, and then the, you know, like I'm really looking forward because some of my best friends from Providence are coming tomorrow night, and I would like to be here and listen because I think I'm going to hear every now and then, ha ha ha. You know, everybody else will be like, what? You know, but do you have that when you write a play?
Yeah, so that friend I was talking about earlier, so that was the first play I ever wrote, and essentially ended our friendship for a while. Then we got back together, got back in touch a year later, and I was writing the siblings play, which was about me coping with my parents' divorce. We became friends because I'd run away from home, and like she was all I had. And she saw that play, and it like, yeah.
So it brought you back to her.
Yeah. It was like seeing the other side,
Mhm.
because she experienced it like she was me or my siblings,
Uh-huh.
you know, instead of like seeing what it was doing to someone, she was accessing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it hard? Had you warned her?
Can
Can you remember?
I remember telling her what it was about.
Mhm.
Yeah. And she was like, yeah, I want to see it, I want to support you.
Uh-huh.
Like, yeah. And then she saw it, and
How'd she
we
react?
cried. We had a cry.
You did,
We
yeah.
had a big cry, and then a big
Interesting,
smoke
right?
break. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you ever, it sounds like you work from your life.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Do you think all of us do?
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lucy.
Yeah, it does, definitely.
Yeah. It's kind of like all I know. I think I'm so lucky because I'm surrounded by all of you who are so brave, and you know, you talk about the shit that matters. And, I think that's all I've been taught how to do as a playwright.
Well, I think also right now, I think we came out of a period where there was a lot of irony. There was a lot of distance from work. And I think actually what's happening in theater especially, and I've been waiting because I'm a fairly sincere writer and try to tell the truth rather than talk about the truth. I try to come from the inside telling the truth. And I think actually because there had been so much irony for such a long time, suddenly sincerity is looking true again.
Yeah.
Like, and you're able to shock people with sincerity. You're able to shock people with small truths because we're so used to distance, you know, in so many parts of our lives, I think.
Yeah. It's refreshing now.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear the truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, and it's actually kind of dangerous to be honest,
Yeah.
you know? Especially for people like, I mean, I'm gay, and you're a person of color, and you're a woman, you know, and you're a woman. We have all of these roles, but there are places where it's not possible to, it hasn't been thought to be possible to be true,
Yeah.
to tell the truth, you know? I have sort of kept in my back pocket what I think is radical about the play that you saw. And what I think is radical about this play, and that I'm so proud of myself for doing, is I think that David, being such a likable person, got you to listen to him for 30 minutes. And got you to listen to a guy who isn't a drag queen, and isn't dying of AIDS, and isn't the funny gay friend, the sort of the tropes that we usually present on stage and are valuable to see on stage. But he actually is just a guy. And I think it's radical that you watch and sort of start to like this guy who's just a guy, who's a gay guy, and suddenly a gay guy is an everyman. And I don't think that that's been shown that often, so I'm very proud of that, because I think it's really important. What feels really important to me is that I'm actually not special because I'm gay. I'm just another guy. And it's what I learned when I left. In Rhode Island, I'd been a big gay rights activist. It was in the late 80s, early 90s, when AIDS was very tough. And we'd do lots of protesting with ACT UP. And it was a very small band because only about 15 of us were comfortable enough to know that most of us were in grad school, so we couldn't be fired. And that's why we did it. Because the rest of the gay people in Rhode Island didn't have, like, could be fired, or could lose their families, or could, you know, be shunned. And, then I moved to San Francisco, and I was so tired because I've been doing this for 5 years, and I got to San Francisco and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just a white gay guy. You know, there are people here who like turning into women. Or they're, you know, like they're fairies out in the woods playing, you know, it was awesome. I was like, I'm just like this guy. But it's hard to get to play that role in the world sometimes, so that's why I was excited to do this play, you know.
I actually have a question for all three of you, because like so there's this, so you each like have moments where you put yourself something vulnerable about yourself into your writing. And when you're sitting there in your room and you're doing it, like what's going on in your head? Like how do you let yourself do it, or what tools do you use to navigate the difficulty of like taking something personal and typing there? Do you say like, well, I can always take it out later, or do you say like, how do you let yourself do that? Because I think for most of us, that seems like one of the scariest things the person could do.
Ren.
Okay. I feel like, for me, if I'm getting to the truthful and hard scenes, if it feels good when I'm writing, it's not where I want to go. I usually just let myself cry and shit on the page, and then hear that draft, and then figure out, but where's the story? What am I trying to say? What am I trying to get across? And then I'll like cut it into a shape from there. Usually.
What's that? Yeah, if it feels good to write it, that's therapy.
Yeah.
That's journal keeping.
Yeah, diary.
That's
yeah.
your diary, babe. If it really feels painful to write it and you don't want anyone ever to read it and you're convinced that it couldn't be worse, you may or may not be onto something.
Right. It might not be, but it might be.
If it feels good, I mean, this is the difference between self-expression, which feels so good, and communication, which is so freaking difficult, right? So and that's.
Say that again, because that was a revelation for me when you first said that to me.
Oh, well,
It's
self-expression
an idea.
feels so good, right? I'm writing from the heart, like my students say, I'm writing my truth, you know, and it's pouring out of me, they say. I'm like, oh, shoot me now. And, you know, communication, as we all know from living in the world, is extremely difficult and painful. You know, trying to tell the person you live with why you had to be out all night, you know, or why you have, you know, this is difficult, trying to tell your children why you have to limit them in ways that they don't understand. I mean, this is painful, yicky, difficult stuff, and that's communication. That's what you're trying to do with the reader. You're trying to reach up off the page, grab the reader, and pull them down, and it doesn't feel good, and it's not, you know, it's an art. It's not even just a skill, it's an art. So I'm so glad you said that, because in my experience, if it feels good, it's probably not very good. And it isn't just that it doesn't feel good. Like, I will often fall asleep while I'm writing. Like, I'll down on the computer. Literally, it's just so painful, you know? Or I gain about 50 pounds when I write a book because, you know, when I wake up, I stumble into the kitchen and have a snack. I mean, anything to mitigate that pain. Or I don't mean to, I also don't want to sound melodramatic about it, but it doesn't feel good. But I don't have a conscious, like, oh my God, when they read this, they're going to know it's Uncle Al. I'm not even thinking about that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just trying to get through the.
Do you think that part of the reason, like one of the ways they minimize memoirs by saying that it's expression rather than communication?
Well, that's definitely the idea, right? Confessional. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's their
As
version
if
of diary,
confession were,
right?
You know.
Rather than you're trying to tell something that will then
Exactly.
communicate with people,
Exactly.
which is what we're trying to do, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
No, it's a good point. That's one way they're definitely trying to minimize it.
Yeah.
And what does it feel like then when you're like sitting in an audience watching people watch your play when you put something so close to yourself on the stage? I mean, that's
It's great. No, it is great. It is great. It's interesting.
It looks really scary. I gotta say, if I had to as I was coming up the fire stairs, people were coming out of the play.
How
And they
did it
were
sound?
talking about it. It sounded good, but I don't want to have to hear about a book of mine.
Well, I tell everybody that when I see a play, I sit there and I tell everyone around me that I wrote it. Because I don't want them to say anything mean. You know? It's smart though, right? You gotta do what you gotta do. I have a different, I'm trying to think of how I do the question before, which was, how do I do the thing? And a friend of mine and director, Trip Coleman, was listening to me talk one day. He said, oh my God, what you just said is the name of your autobiography. And I say, what did I just say? And he says, you just said, I wasn't going to tell anybody, and then I told everybody. Which is both my virtue and a problem for me, because I do when I hear something, I think it's I've told that story 500 times because I just think it's charming and interesting and it makes you think. Or the thing about expression and communication, I tell everybody because I find it so I just love finding nuggets of things that I think prompt us into waking up or seeing something new, and it thrills me to go, hey, look at this, and so
Right.
I use my own life in that way. I was
Right.
I remember the story of the the driving license, getting my license, where that happened. So I was so thrilled that it happened, and she was like, what do you think? What would you have put? And I was like, I don't know, what would you have put?
Just that actually worked for you.
It totally worked for me, because it was one of my, it got me through. You have to have certain skills when you're gay, when I was growing up. You had to have charm or a talent. You had to be really good at sewing, or something. It had to be very, very funny. And what I had was a surfeit of charm. I was able to sort of tilt my head the right way to make someone think, oh, he's a little bit sad, but cheerful. I remember it very clearly. I walked up and I did this, and then I was so proud that I was 30 and I hadn't learned to drive. Like, this says something, right?
Did she know that? Was she?
No, but I probably told her. As I probably
Right.
came up and said, I'm very proud of myself for having done this here. And then I watched her, sort of hopefully. And then she went, oh. And I remember her doing it. It was like, she said, you need to get 18 instead of 17. I was like, oh. And she went, oh. And I went, oh. And I know that if you match them, they start to connect. And then she said, well, and I think she was sort of disappointed that I hadn't passed too, so she was trying to figure out what to do. She's like, well, what should you put? And I don't know, what are we going to put? I would have put C. Well, then I guess I would put C too.
That's such a great
This is an
story.
idea, Then we both had a great moment because really, who cares? 18, 17. So silly, right? If you got 17, you should pass. I mean, all these people are driving that are horrible drivers. Honestly.
We should all march on the DMV right now.
Yes, absolutely. How are we doing so far?
We're doing good.
Yeah.
We should probably open to questions from.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. I was nervous.
We're doing great.
Thanks.
So let's hear some questions from you guys. Yeah, sorry.
I just want to make a comment. I wanted so much to speak when you made the comment. Susan said that you apologized that our generation, and this young lady said, look what I wrote. And I'm 74, and I used to be an English teacher. I have been an English teacher and a bit of a writer. And the thing that popped into my mind is a little bit because I burned my bra in the 60s so that you women would stand in your power.
Yes.
And I mention that to so many young people, the way I've seen women change. And the first generation was, that generation of the suit and the tie, and you just had to beat the men down and, male bashing. And now your generation comes in with the sweetness and the feminine, but strong. And I have a little 2-year-old little granddaughter that, by golly, nobody's going to ever tell her what to do, So it's beautiful to see that.
Mm.
So I attest it to burning the bra in the 60s. We had a long road to go, and we still do. But,
And you did an excellent job.
but I really saw that in the comment that you made. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we're next to you.
There was a point in the play which Martin said, he was talking about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that it was so difficult to get the truth, and then when you found it, then you almost just lost it because you went on and you didn't really realize, and I'm sure that was you talking, but I was wanting to relate it to the memoir. When you find the truth, do you search for the truth? Is it difficult to find the truth? And once you find the truth, what do you do about it? I mean, just to pick up on that theme.
That's great, thanks. Ren? Because you're the youngest, we get to do this to you. Susan?
Oh, yeah, Red.
Ren?
Oh, man.
Do you think you write the truth?
Yes, but I think that every play feels like there's one that I'm trying to get, and I'm chasing it all the time.
Yeah.
Which is why there's like so many drafts over and over again. Yeah, I don't know if
It's our job, right?
Yeah.
It's our
Yeah,
job
I
to
think
search and search and search.
To answer your question about how do I feel when I realize I'm about to rat out a family member, you didn't put it that way. We're like an order of monks. Writers are like monks. I mean, we're devoted to the idea that we're gonna change the way you see the world by telling you the truth. It's a weird idea, but that's the idea most of us have. And I say to myself, what kind of writer am I if I'm holding back on this? You know, I mean, you know, I've devoted my life to the perhaps spurious, my generation, idea that by exposing myself and reaching out to try to communicate with you, I can change the way you see the world. If I'm gonna, am I gonna hedge on that? How stupid would that be, right? I'm not. So when I see a glimmer of the truth, I pursue it. You know, I think one of the things, here I go talking again. I think another answer to your question is process. So here's how I write. And I don't know if you can write a play this. I say to myself, okay, Susan, this book is due in a year, you're gonna write 1,000 words a day, and you're not gonna reread it, because if you reread it, you'll get stuck. So I write 1,000 words a day for 2 months. And then I've got 60,000 words. And sometimes I use 5,000 of those. And sometimes I use, but in other words, for me, first I have to like make the marble or the clay or whatever it is, and then I have to pick through it. So it isn't a process where I'm sitting there going, is this the truth or not? By the time I'm making that decision, I've already read it 17 million times. And, you know, just like a book that I wrote about my drinking, I had 200 pages. I gave them to my not particularly brilliant free intern from the University of Ohio, and I said to him, circle every paragraph that gets your attention. He circled 20 paragraphs, I strung them together, and that's the first chapter of the book. So it's a very weird process that involves going over the stuff over and over again until you can really almost recite it. So it isn't like you're sitting there at the computer going, here's the truth, shall I grab it? It's floating up from the surface of your work. At least that's my experience.
What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, it goes back to your point about, what? Objective truth versus
Subjective.
subjective truth. And I feel like with plays, with theater, you're saying this is what happened to me, this is what I know, this is what happened to me, this is my story, this is what I've experienced and what I've seen. And then I don't think it's done until you can say, this is what's happening to us. Like, well, and how you bring in the audience, what you do to the people that witness your stories.
Right. Becomes the
That's the
truth. The truth is somewhere
Yeah,
between
and
us,
it's like
right?
Instant,
It's
and
exactly
it's
the
and then
same
it's
way
gone
in
when
the book,
the
though, right?
Yeah.
when the curtain comes
It's like
down.
between you and the reader. It's
Yeah.
between us and our audience. It's
Until
similar thing,
it's
right?
the writer and the reader are in a relationship.
Yeah.
Again, communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Conversation.
exactly.
Yeah, question in the back.
I just have a question about the scene in the funeral parlor. One of the things that occurred to me, there was frequently this element of connection. And there was such a lack of connection between the funeral parlor people who were working and the fact that they were dealing with the dead body. And I just wondered if that was just part of what you were trying to convey, or...
I think actually there was a disconnect between what they were saying, but I actually felt they were very connected to his body and how they treated his body. So that, you know, I think we were trying to show that it was a very, is the word pedestrian or quotidian experience for them, because they do it all the time. And so, of course, if I'm doing this all the time, then I'll talk to you about something else, you know? But I'm still doing this. And so the connection was there in the body rather than in the... So there's so many levels in a play. There's the physical, there's the what you're having, there's the spoken. And what I think as a playwright, I'm trying to write on a it's like playing that game where you have all these different, you're playing checkers on a bunch of different levels. One of the levels I worked on is the purely physical, it's the action of the scene. And so that action of that scene was very, really emotional, I think, for people watching it. Because you think of, oh, who I know that's died? I wonder if it looked like that when they were taking care of them. And then if I put on top of it this sort of this like, oh, my sister, wah, 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 the little tree frog, you're something's gonna happen inside you. You'll forget that there's that thing, or you'll remember, oh my gosh, they're working on that body. Even though I was just laughing. I can't laugh, they're working on a dead body, you know? So it knocks you off of what, I always want people to be knocked out of what they think they're supposed to think. That's my goal as a writer, is to say to you, there might be another way to think about this, or would it be interesting? That's my goal.
Right here.
Thank you. As a young playwright, I love the idea of working from this like very honest truth, very personal truth, and I was wondering about your process as playwrights, and whether that living that truth and writing about that truth impacts what you see on the stage and the kind of bodies that you're aware of putting on the stage, because plays and theater in general is so inherently political. Is that something that you're aware of while you're writing? Is there any leeway with that, or because, I don't know, you would surround yourself with like white gay men, like that's who you would portray on stage?
I'll tell you another little secret about this play that people I don't think notice, but there are no straight men in it. I think there's one mentioned, I think, in the whole play. I can't remember which one it was. Oh, maybe her son might be straight. With a little tree frog. Gary might be straight. You know, there's like, but usually it's you know. But for me it was a little bit of a point, like okay, so let's just not have them on stage once. Let's see what happens. See whether you notice.
Didn't matter.
Not to us, but there's some guys who come see the show who aren't that pleased.
Really?
It's harder to connect. I think it's tough. I mean, this is where I think sexism is, soapbox. So forgive me, but I think the reason sexism is so tough is that, and I get angry about it, is it's hard on all of us. It's like men, I'm just gonna say what I think. Men have so often are the center of a story that it becomes hard for them sometimes to deal if it's not about them, because they're so used to them being the hero, or the women, I think, actually are used to not being the hero, and so have to learn to empathize with the story. I think we're teaching each other who gets to empathize and who doesn't. I'm not sure men get to practice as much in terms of storytelling. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think that's something we're going through right now in our culture, is that and I don't like it because I don't think we should, like, my goal is not to say, oh, you don't get to be part of it, but it feels important that it's acknowledged that it's been that way for a long, long time. And I think what we're seeing now is sometimes the revenge of, instead of like, okay, let's still tell the truth, you know? I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
Beautifully put.
Oh, really? Okay, good. It's hard because I'm looking at this gentleman right here. I don't know if you're gay or you're straight, but I'm in the red sweater, and I'm thinking about how a man would feel if I said that. Like,
Well,
it's not kind in a way, or it's not.
It's interesting to hear you say it,
Mhm.
and I realize it now. Throughout the play, I was watching the characters for who they were. I didn't give a damn whether they were gay or straight.
Yeah.
It was, you know, it was his problems and what was going on in his life and how he affected his friends.
Mhm.
Frankly, you know, if you were making a point, that obviously you were, I guess it must have gone right over my head.
I don't think I was.
It never occurred to me that that would be an issue.
That's
That's
because you're
great.
straight.
I'm thrilled about it.
That's because you're the classic white, straight man. You don't have to think like that. And
Well, I
God
try
bless
not
you.
to. Sometimes,
But-
sometimes I do, a little bit. I'll
Some
be
of us
75
have to
in
think
4
like
weeks.
that even
And
to walk
I
down
grew
the
up in a much different era.
Right.
And sometimes I feel a little uneasy when people talk about same-sex marriage and stuff
Mhm.
like that. But I realize it's my problem.
Yeah. Thank God for New York.
There's been like a noticeable change. I mean, just even from like sitting in my office downstairs from here at Playwrights Horizons, there was about 5 years ago or something, we did a season of plays, and I got a letter from somebody saying, "What you have all these great characters in the plays you're producing. Like, what's the point you're trying to make about that?" And it was sort of like, well, that doesn't even occur to me. Like that would. Like, we're not making a point, we're producing the plays that people are writing, but that's not a thing that I don't think would be said today. I think that is a difference that's happened in the last 5 years. I mean, I think a lot of it's probably since, I would have to say, since marriage equality. I think that's just things quickly became, the culture quickly started to feel open to us gay people.
Well, I think it's everywhere though too, right? I remember I wrote a play called The Receptionist, which is about a receptionist. And when I was in Hartford doing a workshop of it, someone said, "How come it's about the receptionist? Why isn't it about the boss?" And I was like, well, but I think that's actually something that's really happening right now. Is a lot of stories are being told that are unusual. Like I think we can even, it's just showing up a lot now. It's like
Well,
people
and that's
are.
what memoir does.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right?
what we started
It's what
with.
started it,
Yeah,
I think.
it's the invisible people are
talking.
writing books now and having plays written about them.
Right, and getting books published, which is a huge imprint, right? I mean, it's saying that this is a valuable thing.
Yes,
They're not
yes,
self-publishing, they're
yes.
actually getting published and
Exactly.
getting on the top of the
Exactly.
bestseller list, and
They are, yes.
Question right there. Yeah, you.
Hi. I have a question about what you were talking. My name is Washuka, I'm with NTI, I'm from Kenya. How do you overcome the terror of writing about other people? Okay, so I have tried on many occasions to document my life, but then I know and I'm very aware of my subjective truth, and I'm also aware of the other person's truth. But from my subjective truth, I can see how that person's actions affected me. But then in my writing, they become demonized because of how they affected me. And so I end up not telling the story because I'm afraid of their demonizing. I'm afraid of telling their story, but I never tell mine. And then I remember, like, when you were talking about social media, I had a conversation with a friend, and I was like, oh, my boyfriend is just like this, my ex, thank God. He's like this, and he's like that, and he just bothers me, and like, he does all these things. And then my mother was telling me something about, oh, you should check your friend's Twitter account. He posted that you guys are doing this. And I go on his Twitter account, and he posted that. I was speaking to my friend Brenda yesterday, Washuka yesterday, and she told me about her and her boyfriend. And she told me that these are the things that she experiences, and these are the things I thought about it. How does everybody feel about that? And I was like, you can't do that. You can't use my life. And he said, I thought it would be interesting content. And I said, my life is not your content. And I didn't speak to him for 3 months. And we're back to being good friends. But like, that feeling of shock of seeing myself like authorized or unauthorized on someone else's pages, I feel almost even afraid to document another person. Like, I'm so scared to even write a play about my family. I think my mom will just die of grief if she saw what I thought. But I don't want to do that to her, so then I will never tell this. So how do you, like, yeah.
I think you're leaving out the main person, which is the audience. It isn't about you and your feelings, or your mother and her feelings, or your friends and their feelings. It's about what you can make the audience feel. And if you're not willing to do whatever it takes to make the audience feel, it's not going to work. But it's really hard to make them feel. Really, really hard, right?
Yes.
Really hard, as you know. And so your feelings, your ex-boyfriend, those feelings really aren't, you have to just, that's just your clay, and you're trying to make a face out of that clay. So it just, courage always sounds like the wrong word to me. I'm so focused I'm making a reader believe that whatever it is I'm trying to, however it is I'm trying to shift their perspective, I'll use anything, I'll do anything. If I could put jam on the page, whatever it takes, I really want them. I mean, I like to say my real audience is somebody who picks up my book in 10 years in a rented house, the covers are warped, they're bored, it's afternoon, they have no idea what the book is, they start to read it, it changes their life. That's who I'm writing for. And that's my highest goal. And every now and then I get a letter from one of those people, right? And that's the stuff. But who cares,
It's the who cares.
who cares about anybody else? In other words, if you're, I just think it's the audience. I say this all the time, but when Aristotle wrote about catharsis, he was not writing about something that happens to the writer. He was writing about something that happens to the audience, right? Writing is not supposed to be cathartic. It's supposed to be yicky. I mean, if we've only taught you one thing, it's yicky in every possible way. Your friends will hate you. Your mother will stop talking to you. It's yuck. You'll be falling asleep on your computer. You'll gain 100 pounds. I mean, it's not good, and the only thing you can look towards is that maybe someday someone you don't even know about will be helped or saved by you. And you may never even know about it.
Right.
And so I'm making it sound insane, but it is a little insane, the creation of art. But I just think you're getting very caught up. I mean, this certainly happens in the feelings of people who aren't your main person. Your main person is someone you'll probably never even meet.
Well, the other thing you used to say when
Sorry to be so blah.
No, you used to say to me when we would talk, you would use the word perverse.
Well, that's a whole other, right?
No, I just use it for myself to know that, there's something in me that's a little tiny bit perverse, which is that and it's not it's not a negative perverse, it's just a different way of thinking. I love art. I love making art. That's what I'm trying to do. And I love it even more than my family sometimes, which is maybe not great or for relationships but sometimes my primary relationship is to my art. And that's what makes me an artist.
I mean, I think you have to ask yourself, would you rather, get along with your brother or have written Moby Dick? And, it's not a pretty choice.
No, it's a hard choice, to be honest. Yeah, right? We're going to write Moby Dick.
Moby Dick was the end of Melville's career, as I'm sure you know. He became a pathetic, time-serving, penny-pinching, sick old man because of Moby Dick. But, he got me. Not that he was alive to care. So I don't know, I think we're so emphatic about it. So what I mean about the reverse is, I don't think you can survive as a writer unless, and I mean now there are all these psychological studies that say that that more people are inspired by criticism than they are by support. So when I get horrible reviews and people write horrible things about me in public saying, she should never write about her family again, it's very painful, but pretty quickly I'm like, I think I'll write another book about my family. When Louisa May Alcott took her little story to James T. Fields, and she was convinced she was going to be a writer, and she was so proud of herself, and she'd written this, she thought, wonderful story, and she took it to him. She was 20, and he read it in front of her, and then he looked up and he said, "Stick to your teaching, you can't write." And that's when she became a writer. And if you're not like that, it's going to be too hard, I think. I just notice when I get a bad review, I'm like, well,
fuck you.
Yeah, I say that, well, fuck you, I'm going to do a double. And we now know that in raising children, you're supposed to say to them, you'll never amount to anything, you'll probably never get into college, because that, it turns out, is more inspirational than saying to them, you can do whatever you want. It turns out that when they interview people who are successful, the people say not, my mother said I could be anything. They say my mother said I could be nothing, and I decided to show her. And so it's not, you know, but I think as an artist, for me at least, it's been very helpful to have that attitude toward authority.
We have time for just 2 more questions. Let's go to you over there. Yeah.
When my mother was entering into her 90s, she was pretty lucid and still articulate, but she began to suffer from a series of small strokes, which would result in her being unintelligible for about a day. And then her brain functions would return and she'd be able to speak again. And we began to realize that the memories that she had altered. Each time she had one of these small strokes, what she remembered of her early life, which she was convinced was the truth, was totally different. And we began to realize that she was actually embroidering that truth with memories she had of her sister. And I just wondered, seeing how fallible our memories are, how confident can you be in writing your memoirs, especially if you're writing memoirs which might hurt someone else, that your memories are accurate enough to be called the truth, and does it matter? Are we all not living an imaginative fiction?
Mike, you can come sit here.
Wow, what a great story. Wow, the frontal cortex is endlessly interesting, is it not? Well, it's an easy, my answer is just so pedestrian as to be not in any way worthy of that elegant and intelligent and amazing
You
question.
just did what I did
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying back, but
I don't know what I'm doing, but since you asked. So, you know, when I write a memoir, I try to make it very clear to the reader, and sometimes I explicitly, it's my memory. It's the best I can do. You know, and I mean, absolutely, memory is totally wackadoodle, even if you're not having little strokes. I mean, I remember my life in a very different way than my brother remembers my life.
Yeah.
And of course, each child, as we now know, has a different experience in the same family. But memory, you know, I have memories of things that many people tell me didn't happen. But I have a contract with the reader. I feel so pedantic up here, I can't even tell you. That's what teaching does to you. I have a contract with the reader, and I try to spell that contract out implicitly in the first few paragraphs. But certainly part of that contract is I'm not going to lie to you knowingly. I'm going to tell you what I remember. I'm going to use what I remember as best I can to illustrate this story. And you know, it's just my memory. Don't get excited. It's not objective. And my brother might tell you, Mary Carr does this so beautifully. She says, my sister would tell you a completely different story. You know, but I think as long as you say to the reader, I'm having this series of small strokes, and every time I remember something it's a little bit different, then that's fine. Again, it's about the relationship with the reader. You can't go lying to the reader. You have to tell them what the deal is. But that's my out. But that's really the best question I've ever heard anybody ask.
That's raised my tread with the students.
So who wants to go next? Well, this will be the last one, because then we have who has to come and reset the set after this.
I just wanted to ask about writing itself. How you mentioned that if it comes easy, maybe you're not doing your best writing. But then you hear about artists and being in the flow, which sounds to me like it's coming easy. So what is the difference? How do those two fit together?
Ren?
You never know.
I think it's listening. It's like when you're training yourself to start listening to really that true voice in there. That's the flow. but it still can be as painful as like the first time you really cut that vein, you know? But to kind of go back to your question, because I have a sort of opposite feeling with my play, the siblings play that I wrote for my siblings. I had to go back and empathize with the perspectives of my parents in order to write it, and relive the memories as them, in order to be fair and like really be honest and tell the truth.
I think it's slightly, for us actually as playwrights,
Yeah.
we actually have to jump into a bunch of different bodies. I have to jump into like multiple bodies. And then what I do also is I trust that the actor is going to bring themselves and tell the truth inside their own body. So we get some help from the actor.
Yeah.
You know, we get
So jealous
a
of
lot.
that.
I know, it's amazing. Because they're like, this doesn't feel truthful to me. I can't make this
You
true.
have a director?
Yeah, you have a director saying like, right, Annie will say, Annie. By the way, Annie directed it. Tell them who this is who directed my play. Pretty friggin' good, right? Yeah.
Oh, the set.
I know, astonishing, right? Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
No, I didn't write that. Actually, Annie and our set designer, Laura Jelnick, came up with it because they're like, okay, we want to have his real apartment, but then he's also written a mortuary, so how do we get that? And I guess this is the way I'm remembering Annie tell me. Laura said, well, all these people come in, maybe they could push through a wall. And then she said, oh, what if we pushed the wall down? And then they were like, oh, and when you're dead, you're lying on the ground, so you see the ceiling. So then you guys become dead seeing the ceiling, which is kind of wonderful, right? Isn't it great? And then when they lift this, suddenly you're under the ground. They thought of this as being the box of the coffin, but I also love, someone else said, no, you're actually underneath the building. So now you're down. So it's just, they did it. It's really astonishing, isn't it? Did you expect the second time? They tricked you too, right? I mean, it's like a good surprise. It's lots of surprises.
So we actually do have to let the crew come in and change over the set, but we'll still be here to answer other questions. Personally, Adam's going to be actually signing books in the lobby just outside, and I just want to say thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.